Have you ever stopped to think about your brain as like a high security VIP lounge? I mean, it's the most important organ you've got, right? And for it to do its incredibly complex job, it needs an environment that's super stable, totally controlled, and completely protected from the chaos of the rest of the body. So let's dive into this fortress and see exactly how it works.
So, this is really the big question we're tackling today. Because when you understand the answer to this, you get why the brain is so special, but also so vulnerable, and why it's so darn hard to treat when things go wrong. We're about to get past that velvet rope.
Okay, first things first, let's just appreciate the real estate we're talking about. Your cranial cavity, your skull, is a fixed space. It's a closed box. And inside that box, you've got this incredibly delicate ecosystem with three main components: the brain tissue itself, the blood that keeps it running, and this amazing fluid that supports the whole operation. And here is the main resident, the star of the show, the brain. It weighs in at about 1,350 grams, which is just under 3 pounds. This is the VIP we are protecting at all costs. Next up, you've got the supply line. At any given moment, there's about 100 milliliters of blood flowing around inside the cranium, delivering all that essential oxygen and all those nutrients. Now, this is what I find so fascinating. There's an equal volume, another 100 milliliters, of this clear, watery liquid called cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF. And this stuff isn't just filler. No way. It is a critical third player, and it's absolutely essential for maintaining the brain's private world. So what you have is this perfect, delicate balance of brain, blood, and CSF, all packed into one space. So how in the world do we keep this environment so clean and stable? Well, the first line of defense is the fortress wall itself, the legendary blood-brain barrier. Okay, the key phrase on this slide, the thing you have to remember, is tight junctions. You see, capillaries everywhere else in your body are kind of leaky, right? They let stuff in and out. But not in the brain. Here, the cells lining the capillaries are literally zippered together, creating this physical barrier that is incredibly tough to get through. So you can think of the blood-brain barrier as the world's strictest bouncer. It blocks big molecules, it blocks highly charged ions, and, this is super frustrating for doctors, it blocks a ton of pharmaceuticals. Only small essential things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and certain nutrients get the all-access pass. And it even has help. Support cells called astrocytes are right there, actively sucking up any extra potassium to keep the environment perfectly tuned for your neurons to fire correctly. All right, let's move on to the second layer of security, the cerebral spinal fluid. If the blood-brain barrier is the fortress wall, then the CSF is both the protective moat surrounding it and the life support system circulating inside. So the CSF really has two main jobs. First, it's a liquid cushion. It lets your brain literally float inside your skull, which protects it from getting banged around. And second, it helps control the chemical environment. This special fluid gets made in these structures called the choroid plexuses, which are tucked away deep inside the brain's inner chambers, the ventricles. And this chart shows you exactly where that fluid lives. While you've got about 35 milliliters deep inside those ventricles, look at that. The majority, about 100 milliliters, is in what we call the subarachnoid space. That's the area that surrounds the entire brain and spinal cord. That's the mode I was talking about. Now get this. This is wild. Your body is cranking out about 0.35 milliliters of this fluid every single minute. At that rate, your entire supply of CSF is completely flushed out and replaced roughly 4 times every 24 hours. This isn't a stagnant pond. It's an incredibly dynamic, active system that's constantly cleaning and refreshing your brain's world. So yeah, this fluid is not just sitting there, it is on a constant journey. Let's actually follow a single drop of CSF and take the grand tour through this central nervous system. Okay, so it starts its life in those choroid plexuses inside the ventricles. From there, it flows through a whole series of interconnected chambers, from the lateral to the third, and then down to the fourth ventricle. Then it squeezes out through these tiny little holes into that subarachnoid space, the moat. After it circulates all around the brain and down the spinal cord, it finally gets reabsorbed back into your blood through these special one-way valves called arachnoid villi. Creation, circulation, reabsorption. It's a perfect continuous loop. But what happens when this beautifully designed fortress is breached? This is when understanding these protective systems becomes so incredibly important, when we start looking at what goes wrong in the brain.
This table just shows you how different the brain's private world really is. Just look at the protein levels. CSF has almost no protein compared to blood. That is direct, hard proof of how well the blood-brain barrier works. So when doctors do a spinal tap and they see high levels of protein in the CSF, they know immediately there's a problem. The barrier has been breached.
And one way that breach can happen is with a brain tumor. Tumors can physically break down those tight junctions of the blood-brain barrier, and that causes it to leak. Now, while that's obviously dangerous, clinicians can actually use this to their advantage. They can inject a dye that normally can't cross the barrier, and then on a scan, they can see exactly where it's leaking into the brain, which shows them precisely where the tumor is.
Now, the other system that can fail is the CSF circulation. If the flow of that fluid gets blocked anywhere along its path, it starts to back up, just like a river behind a dam. This condition is called hydrocephalus. It literally means water on the brain, and it causes a really dangerous increase in pressure inside the skull. And you know where that blockage happens really matters. If the clog is inside the ventricular system, we call it non-communicating hydrocephalus. But if the clog happens after the CSF has already gotten out of the ventricles, say at the very end where it's supposed to be reabsorbed, that's called communicating hydrocephalus. The treatment is totally different depending on where that plumbing problem is. And this all brings us to the final and maybe the most critical question. The very same fortress that does such an amazing job of keeping the brain safe, that blood-brain barrier, it also blocks countless life-saving drugs for treating things like Alzheimer's or brain cancer or infections. So the central challenge for neuroscientists today isn't just understanding the fortress. It's figuring out how to sneak a Trojan horse inside. What do you think is the key?